First Things, episode number 61.
I seem to be lost.
And so you're working around the clock so you don't take time for yourself to feel like an actual human being.
I used to feel like no matter how hard I worked, I was just spinning my wheels.
Trying to be perfect, we try to have everything in place at one point in time, and you can't.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to First Things, the podcast dedicated to practical productivity based on modern research. My name is Brandon Vaughn, and it's my goal to help you apply productive solutions to your life to help you live with less stress, greater passion, and amazing results. So good to have you back with me today as we are continuing our study on essentialism. We are in Chapter 9 of Greg McKeown's book, which is entitled Select, the Power of Extreme Criteria. And this particular chapter is going to end part 2 of the book, which is about exploring how we can discern the trivial many from the vital few. So we've been talking about definitive ways we can discern the trivial things in our lives. Part 1 of the book was about the fact of a mindset. We need to get into the mindset that there are the trivial many and the vital few. Part 2 was all about how we discern the trivial. So we talked about escape, the perks of being unavailable. We talked about looking and seeing what really matters in our life. We talked about 2 of my favorite chapters about play, how we need to embrace play in our life. We need to sleep. We have to protect that asset. And then this week we are talking about the power of extreme criteria as another way to help us discern the trivial many in our lives. But before we talk about that, I want to give you a couple of updates on some things. First of all, as I mentioned the last few weeks, I have a survey out right now, the first annual, can I say annual even though I haven't done it more than once? The first ever listener survey for this podcast. You can find that survey at firstThingsProductivity.com/survey. Again, remember things is plural with an S. And I have 19 people who have taken this survey so far, and that's wonderful and amazing. I'm so appreciative of every one of you who have taken that survey. Some of you have contacted me directly to let me know that you have taken that, so thank you so much for doing that. And I would want to ask anyone who's a regular listener of the show, would you consider doing this? And I know surveys can be kind of dumb and boring, and does my opinion even really matter? And I want to say, yes, it does. It really matters to me. Every single person that's taking this survey, I want to really listen to what you say. And this is your chance to kind of voice it, especially if you're a fan of the show. If you're not a fan of the show, then you probably don't really care. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. When I look at my life, there's very few things I take surveys for. And so there's no animosity at all if you decide not to take my survey. This is for people who really resonate with this show. And I want to give you a chance to speak back into my life and enable me to better serve you. And that's all that we're basically doing here. So think about it. Consider doing it. It's only 10 questions, very short. Probably will only take you 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how much time and effort you put into it. But it's something I would greatly appreciate you consider doing. I've had some amazing conversations this last week. I've been so encouraged by some of the conversations I've been having with you guys. It's really encouraging to me. I cannot tell you how encouraging it is to me to hear from some of you and to know what's going on in your lives and what things are resonating with you and some of the things that you're dealing with in your life. It really matters a lot to me. And this is one of the things I wanted to do better about with everything that I do for First Things, is to really be more in conversation with you guys. Because yes, I can look at these statistics and I can see how many people are listening to my episodes. And, that's really nice. It's nice to kind of be able to visually see who's listening. Well, I don't know who's listening to me, but I have a general idea of where people are listening and how many people are listening. But when I actually hear from some of you guys and gals, it's all the world to me. And it makes it so much more real to me, because right now I'm just sitting in my bedroom with a mic stuck in front of my face and speaking into it, and there's no dynamic of communication going on. And when you guys reply back to me, email me, Facebook me, do all these types of things, it makes it that much real, I think, for both of us, especially for me. I had a great conversation or an email from Louisa from the UK. She was talking about how she just submitted her PhD thesis this last week, and congratulations. Wow, that is a huge, huge thing. Mentioned, some of the shows on procrastination and assertiveness really helped out a lot. And Louisa, I just replied to your email, so hopefully you'll get that. One of the suggestions that she had was that maybe we have a special episode, especially for PhD students, especially since I've gone through that hellacious process. And, that's not a bad idea. I've thought about doing these not as a regular episode, not as like an episode number 62. Let's talk about PhD studies, but maybe as a special. And I just put it out there and anyone who's interested can listen to it, but it wouldn't be a regular episode. Just talk about some of that process, which would be applicable for all sorts of people in degrees and learning positions and things like that. I've often thought about doing a expose, if you will, on online colleges and talking to you about some of the better ones out there and some of the worst ones out there, and which ones really support their students and which ones don't, and which ones really support their faculty and which ones don't. Because I've had an opportunity to teach at a lot of those places throughout the years, and I know a lot of stuff, and not, wanting to just be down on people, but, I've never seen anyone talk about stuff like that, and I may actually do that. But again, Louisa, thank you so much for emailing me, and if you want to email me, you can do so at me@brandonvaughn.com, V as in Victor, AUGHN. Talk to Amanda from Wisconsin on Facebook. And she mentioned how she was really helped by the series on assertiveness and conflict, mentioned how she was really putting in this whole stuff into practice. Amanda, thank you so much for reaching out to me as well. Justin on Facebook left me a comment about experiencing so much of what we had talked about in our last episode over sleep. And thanks, Justin. I really appreciate the confirmation of what a lot of the stuff we talked about in that episode meant to you. I've also really been working hard at getting caught up and replying to a lot of the older comments on my discussion site, which is pretty pathetic, isn't it? I mean, this is my site and I have my own discussion board and people have left me comments and I hadn't even replied to them in like 4 or 5 or 6 months, and really kind of shameful, I guess. But I'm doing it now, and I'm trying to get better because I realize this is a really big thing for me. I want to stay in contact with you guys. Jen just left me just recently, a few days ago, a very lengthy feedback. And Jen, I promise I'm going to get back to you. You left me a lot of great stuff, and working through it, and I will reply. And Tim and Marcus replied recently as well. I was hoping to put out another article this week, another blog article, probably about sleep. And this time I was going to go into some various research about sleep. And this week just kind of got away from me. And so going back to my essentialism, what am I going to emphasize? I'm going to emphasize doing the podcast. I'm going to emphasize writing in my books. I'm going to emphasize doing my music. And then anything else that I have time, I'm going to work that in. And this week, I just didn't have time to finish up that blog article. But I plan on doing that hopefully by next week. Also, I finally convinced my friend Tori into writing an article. He sent me an article, which is great. It's about something called self-efficacy. We're going to talk about that at some point. And I'm hoping I'll have that up in a few weeks, a week or two. I will let you know when I put up his article so you can read some really cool stuff about that. And one last thing before we get going, I mentioned to you last week that Vanessa Van Edwards, who we interviewed on this show for Body Language, is doing a 30-day course on mastering your people skills. And she's talking about all sorts of things from personality types, intelligence types, how you better can communicate through email or in person, how you portray yourself, how what you think that you're portraying may not be what you're actually portraying to people. It's coming across completely differently. It's been really, really good. And again, I don't make 1 cent off of this. So if you guys went out and just thousands and thousands of people buying this course, I would make nothing off of this. So I am recommending this to you because I really think that for a lot of people, it will do you some good and really help you quite a bit. The great thing is that this course is free, at least for about the next 15 days. So you can just tune in and watch it for free right now. And so I would definitely encourage you to, and it's only about an hour at a time, I would definitely encourage you to do that. So, dun, dun, dun. What about my Essentials report card? I did this last week. I'll do it again. Well, my writing is still rocking it out. I would probably put myself at about an A- this week. I've just been able to do it every single day again, but some days have been a little bit, gosh, what would I say? My mind has wandered, I guess, at times because I've had to do it later in the day and I wasn't able to do it in the morning. I'm recording this podcast right now at night, and I just finished doing some writing just a few minutes ago to catch up for the day that I wasn't able to do it this morning because I had a dentist appointment this morning, so I wasn't able to do it then. But still, I'm maintaining pretty good. My music is at a B, and I've done a lot of better inroads with making sure I've done my music. I think tonight was the first night I really had not done any music, which is a little frustrating because, again, it's important, but I want to go ahead and record this podcast so I can work on it tomorrow and hopefully get it out for all you guys. But I've been doing much better. And again, one of my friends from Alabama sent me another track, a rock track again that Kind of sounds like the old Canadian band Rush. I added some keyboards and guitars, and I'll play it for you at the end of this episode. Again, don't feel like you have to listen to the whole thing. If you don't like it, then just turn it off. It's not going to hurt my feelings, but just so you can hear some of this. And also been working on some of my things this week. So I've started getting back out and trying to break that down into smaller segments. I picked one of the songs that I wanted to try to have done, if possible, by this weekend. And that means I've got to record some guitar and vocal parts. And I'm hoping to get that done by this weekend. I'm pushing myself. It's something I want to do. Sleep, much better, probably at around a B. I'm getting much more sleep, as we talked about, at least 7 hours. I think one night, for some reason, I think just so much weird stuff going on with dogs barking and needing to go to the bathroom and things like that. I got about 6 hours and 40 minutes and wasn't feeling very good the next day. But generally, I've been getting about 7 hours of sleep. Doing really good on that. Doing better about eating and exercise. I would give myself a B. So, hey, I've gotten out of the C world. I'm no longer a C student. I'm at least a B student on a lot of things. Okay, so enough of that. I mentioned some of this, because many of you have mentioned in emails or conversations how me giving you reflections of my life helps. And I don't always like to go too much into depth into that because then this whole show becomes like a diary or a journal for me. But I don't mind sharing some of my struggles and things like that as we go through this. And I hope that it does help in some way to hear some of the things I'm doing, some of the things I fail at, some of the things that I'm still exploring in my life. So chapter 9, the power of extreme criteria. So this is a technique that you're going to learn in this chapter to help you select those vital few things. And what Greg starts out with in this chapter is a popular speaker by the name of Derek Sivers. I think it's Sivers or Sivers. I think it's Sivers. And he did this thing. It's only about a minute and it's on YouTube. And I'll play it for you right now. It's a short piece called No More Yes. It's either hell yeah or no. So let's listen to Derek as he talks about this right now.
No, yes. Either hell yeah or no. You can use this same rule on yourself if you're often overcommitted or too scattered. If you're not saying hell yeah about something, say no. When deciding whether to do something, if you feel anything less than, wow, that would be amazing, absolutely, hell yeah, then say no. When you say no to most things, you leave room in your life to throw yourself completely into that rare thing that makes you say, hell yeah. Every event you get invited to, every request to start a new project, if you're not saying hell yeah about it, say no. We're all busy. We've all taken on too much. Saying yes to less is the way out.
That's pretty short and sweet. The essence of what this is basically saying is we've got to start saying yes to the things that are really yes things. Not just a yeah, okay, this is fine. It's the thing, yes, I want to do this. And there's so much enthusiasm and drive. That's what we need to try to reserve our yeses for. As Derek was saying, we need to say yes to the things that's a hell yeah. Yes, I want to do this. Not just a yeah, okay. That's not the type of thing. Maybe another way of saying this is that if the answer isn't a definite yes, then it should be a no. This is a totally unrelated topic, but back in an episode where we were talking about saying no to things, I mentioned to you that your most definitive yes, or your strongest, actually I have that backwards, let me get it right here. Your most definitive no is a well-defined yes. That's how I said it. Your most definitive no is a well-defined yes. In other words, it's so much easier to say no to things if you have in your mind a well-defined yes. What do I want to say yes to? And when you know what you really want to say yes to, it's a lot easier to say no to things. So these kind of two things go very much hand in hand with each other. Now, Greg talks about something called a 90% rule. And so I'm going to give you a thing that you can visualize with this. And I really almost hate to give this because I'm going to say something that mirrors something that I detest in the business world. Something called the Net Promoter Score. I've talked about that, hinted at it, and I won't go into all those gory details because it involves a lot of statistics and psychometrics. Net Promoter Score is what a lot of people will ask you on a scale from 1 to 10 or 0 to 10. How would you rate this service? How likely are you to recommend? And you hear some people, they'll tell you, if you don't rate me a 9 or a 10, it means that we will fail. And I've always wondered, before I really got into doing some consulting in certain businesses, why on earth would they say something like that? If you don't rate me a 9 or a 10, it means that I fail, because that's saying you're perfect to many people. And, maybe you aren't perfect, but you still gave me great service. So why can't I rate you a 7 or an 8 and that be good enough? Oh, you just don't understand it. It'll be just like I failed if you give me an 8, which leaves me scratching my head. But it's this whole net promoter crazy nonsense that's out there that I won't bore you with. But I often thought I should create a statistics podcast and then I could go into that a lot more detail. If any of you deal with businesses and you deal with NPS or Net Promoter Score and you're interested in my wacky views about how that's the evil of society today and why that particular thing is really not a good thing statistically, just email me. I'll tell you about that. But I want you to imagine a scale from 1 to 10 or 0 to 10 in your life. And very much like I was hinting at, that the 9s and the 10s are things that are an obvious yes to you. Now, the problem is that we can rate things like a 1 or 2, and these are our obvious no's. The dilemma is always the 7s and the 8s. Those are the things, that we debate. Should I do this because it's good, but it's not a 9 or a 10? And basically, I want you to kind of make this an NPS. And there I said, I can't believe I said it. As much as I despise NPS and its usage of things, I think this is actually a good use for that kind of methodology. So basically what I mean by this is that if there's anything in your life that's not a 9 or a 10, you should give it a 0. So don't sit around and debate your 7s and 8s. Well, this is good and it's almost good enough. I really maybe should spend time and energy on this, but it's not really a 9 or a 10. Well, just go ahead and make it a 0. Anything that's not a 9 or a 10 is a 0, even if it's good things. And this is what Greg calls the 90% rule, is that basically you rate anything lower than 90% on your intensity scale. Rate anything less than 90% is automatically given a 0 and you reject it. This can help you many times to weed through, again, the vital few. Remember what we're trying to do here in these chapters is we are trying to help us discern the vital few. So we're trying to give us some tools by which we can cut through the noise in our lives. And quite frankly, again, there's a lot of very good options that we can do, but they're not the best options. And this is where we start getting more picky about what things we're going to say yes to. And that means that we're going to say yes to some things that are honestly very good things, but they're not the best things. And that's the whole point. So try that out. Try out this 90% rule or this scale from 1 to 10 and think about things in your life that you would rate as a 9 or a 10, and anything less than that. Anything less than a 9 are things you're going to start working to say no to. Now, again, there are things in life that sometimes you can't say no to. So yes, maybe you could say no to paying taxes, but there's consequences to that. And you either be a fugitive of the government or end up paying more money or end up in jail at some point. So maybe that is a 3 to you, and that's no, I don't want. Well, but you do have choices. You could let someone else do your taxes for you. You could go ahead and proactively do them ahead of time and get them over with. I mean, you do have choices in that, and we should never rob ourselves of that. But what we're trying to do is to find those things that we should really be saying yes to. And we should be saying yes to those above everything else we're going to say yes to. Here's something Greg says in the book. He says, the benefits of this ultra-selective approach to decision-making in all areas of our lives should be clear. When our selection criteria are too broad, we will find ourselves committing to too many options. What's more, assigning simple numerical values to our options forces us to make decisions consciously, logically, and rationally, rather than impulsively or emotionally. Yes, it takes discipline to apply tough criteria, but failing to do so carries a high cost. For some of us, way too often, we are just saying yes to everything. So yes, okay, there is a criteria that comes to us. My manager asked me to do it, then I should do it. And we may could debate that, at some point. Can you really say no to those types of things? And I say, yes, you can, but yes, there could be consequences. But for many of us, though, we go even beyond that dilemma to something that is a lot more of a battle we can win. And that is, if anyone asks me to do something, I should try to do it. And many of us fall under that type of stinking thinking. Not just if my manager or my boss asks me to do something, but if anyone asks me to do something, then I should try to do that. And that is a non-essentialist way of thinking. Even worse, instead of someone asking us, we self-impose that type of bondage onto ourselves by saying if other people in the company are doing it, then I should be doing it. So it's not even that someone asks us to do it. we just put it on ourselves because other people are doing it. Now, this is really rampant in our day because of social media. So constantly you pull up on Twitter or Facebook or on Instagram or text messages or emails. You learn what other people are doing with their time. This is what other people are doing. And suddenly you can put this burden on your shoulders, a self-imposed burden of what you should be doing. And, we've said many times in past episodes that you should on yourself. Don't should on yourself. But many of us do. I should be doing this. I should do that. I don't know about you, but anytime I think about what I should be doing, many of those shoulds are under 5s on my 0 to 10 scale. They're not a 9 or a 10. Yeah, sometimes I may say I should be doing music, but I mean it completely differently. When I say I should maybe check in on Facebook and see if I have any new notices, I would never equate that type of should with I should be doing music. And really, I don't even think should do music is, since it's a 9 or a 10 for me, I think it's the wrong word. I don't think I should say, there I go. It's hard to say should when you keep saying should. I think maybe a better way of saying with my music is I want to do music. It's not that I should do music. I want to do music. And it's not nearly the same type of passion as checking Facebook. And when I find myself spending an hour checking Facebook every single day, I'm doing something that is on a level 3 of my 1 to 10 scale, where music is more like a 9 or a 10 for me. I'm off balance. I'm not practicing essentialism at that point. So a non-essentialist is going to say yes to almost every request or opportunity put before them. But an essentialist is going to live by a simple rule. They are going to say yes to only the top 10% of opportunities. A non-essentialist is happy living with very broad, implicit criteria like, if someone I know is doing it, I should do it. Or if anyone asks me to do something, I should try to do it. Whereas an essentialist is going to use very narrow, explicit criteria like, is this exactly what I am looking for? Is this a 9 or a 10 on my scale of things to do? We must learn a very selective criteria. Here's one way to think about this. You just won the lottery for $100 million. You've just won it. And you do not, let's suppose you do not have very good money skills. And some of you listening to me may be accountants and bankers and whoever, but let's just pretend that you know nothing about money and investing it or anything like that. You've just won $100 million, and you know there are people out there who are just eager to take some of your money, to rob you, to do deceiving things with your money, or maybe do ignorant things with your money, and suddenly you end up being broke because they made stupid investment decisions. Now, if you're going to hire somebody to be like your money guard, someone that's going to be like your accountant, but it's going to be your personal accountant, and they're in charge of protecting your money, would you just hire anyone for something like that? I don't think many of us would. I think many of us would be very picky about who we hire. Someone comes to us and says, hey, I just graduated last week. And it's like, oh, goodness, I don't know if I want to put you in charge of my money. Well, maybe I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. What was your GPA? Oh, I had a 2.97. It was a little bit low because I would be partying a lot during the weekends. And, I don't know if I want to put you in charge of my money. Oh, where did you go to school? Oh, Topeka Junior College. That's where I went. Okay, sorry, just leave now. I don't even want to look at you anymore. Shoo, get out the door. Leave me alone. Here's someone, I have a doctorate in accounting, but even more so, I have helped people double their money when they've won lottery. I've worked for 2 people who've won lotteries, and I've helped them double their money, and I can show you and give you references. Okay, you're hired, fella. I'm going to be very picky about but we don't do this in our lives. We have this amazing bank account called life. It's the very breath that we breathe. The fact that you are listening to me today means that you've been given the most incredible gift of life. You are alive right now, and you can live things that are dreams for you. But we are so sloppy about what we will let dictate our lives. So we have $100 million of life right with us right now. And we'll go out and we'll just blow $500,000 on Facebook, $500,000 on text messages, $500,000 reading the news. And we're not doing anything of what's really investing in our lives. And we're not paying people that are really bringing it back to us. we've got to come up with a better criteria, a much more stringent criteria that focuses on less but better, not more and more and more and more. Remember what we said in the earlier chapters, making millimeters of progress in a million different directions. No, we want to make yards and miles and kilometers in distance, but we're going to have to focus on a few things, less but better. Greg mentions a book by Jim Collins, a book called Good to Great. I have actually never read this book, and I'm curious if any of you guys have read this book, if it's something you would recommend me checking into, or if you have any recommendations about that. But basically, he mentions in this book by Jim Collins that there's one thing that you are passionate about that you can be the best at, then if you can find that one thing, if there is one thing that you are so passionate about that you are the best at, then you should do just that one thing. Now, that's pretty extreme. I don't know if I would go that far. Maybe I should. Maybe if we all did this in life, maybe our world would be a very different place. But I love the theme of this, if nothing else. I mean, it is very extreme, but maybe we need to be a little bit more extreme. Okay, maybe you can't go that far. Maybe you can't go so far as saying that's the only thing I'm going to do is the thing that is ranked 10 on my list. I'm going to even say no to the 9s. I'm only going to say yes to the 10 in my life. Well, that's extreme, but if we just did a little bit more of that, we would be so much better in our lives. So let me quote Greg again from the book, from this chapter, where he's talking about some ways in which we can start doing this. He said, here's a simple, systematic process you can use to apply selective criteria to opportunities that come your way. First, write down the opportunity. Second, write down a list of 3 minimum criteria the options would need to pass in order to be considered. Third, write down a list of 3 ideal or extreme criteria the options would need to pass in order to be considered. By definition, if the opportunity doesn't pass the first set of criteria, the answer is an obvious no. But if it also doesn't pass 2 of your 3 extreme criteria, the answer is still no. And I thought that was really an interesting way of doing this. So you kind of have this minimum threshold of that it's got to pass all of these, otherwise it's going to be a no. But then you have maybe something more extreme criteria. And in this case, it doesn't have to pass all of these extreme criteria. It just needs to pass maybe 2 out of your 3 extreme criteria. So I don't think Greg really even gives an example of this, of using this. So let me just kind of make up an example to show you this. So let's say that someone has approached me to write on their blog, and they say, hey, I've heard your podcast, would love if you would kind of write some articles for me, and you could do this on a regular basis. Now, this is an opportunity for me, and maybe it would expose me to a larger audience. So maybe I have some minimum criteria that I want to always consider opportunities. And maybe, let's say one of them is that I have opportunities to be creative, whether that be in writing or music or something like that. I want to always try to do things that expose more of my creative passions in life. And okay, well, that meets my minimum criteria, writing for someone's blog, because I am going to be doing some creative type of things like that. Maybe I have another criteria that I don't want to do something that is going to constantly pull me away from my family. So, for instance, if someone came along and said, hey, Brandon, we are going on tour. We're going to go all around the world. We want you to be our guitarist, and we want to hire you right now. Maybe it's Coldplay or U2 or someone that comes to me and says, hey, we want to hire you. Come with us on the road. And that would be an amazing opportunity. It would meet my minimum criteria of creativity in droves. Yes, of course, I want to do that. But then I come to my second criteria, my minimum criteria. It's got to be something that doesn't take me away from the home. So I would end up saying no to that amazing opportunity. I mean, granted, if Paul McCartney came to me, said, hey, I want you to play in my band, that might be the one case that actually shocks me so bad that I would sit and say, okay, I need to think through this a little bit. And maybe I would actually say yes to something like that, because Paul doesn't, do 500 concerts in a year. He's very selective and only does maybe, 30 or 40 dates. And so maybe that doesn't really pull me away from the family as much. But, that's kind of my minimum criteria for that. So going back to my blog example. So let's say so far it's kind of met my criteria. And just for time's sake, I won't make up a third minimum criteria for this. But then I go to my extreme criteria, and what is really the extreme things I really want to be doing in my life? And so I get around and I want to do my own music. I want to write my own things. Well, okay, it didn't pass that criteria, but that's a very extreme criteria. And I know when it comes to the extreme criteria that I don't always need to have a definitive yes for all of those, such as writing a book. So maybe that's another extreme criteria, is that I want to write, but I want to write books. And this is my extreme criteria for that. Well, writing a blog article for someone else doesn't really satisfy that. Now, there's a possibility that if I wrote my own blog article on my site, I could actually reuse that to be part of a book. So it kind of serves that dual purpose. Now, the only way I could do that for someone else's blog is if I was to channel it through that criteria. But I've already kind of hit a no to two maybe extreme criterias for me. And therefore, maybe at this point, because I don't have to have all the extreme criteria be a yes, but I do have to meet the minimum ones, but I need at least one extreme criteria to be satisfied somewhere in that. And so in this case, I would probably end up saying no. And maybe this is a huge opportunity. I mean, this could be somebody big like a Tim Ferriss or a Michael Hyatt or Pat Flynn or any of these other people that are like really big and famous in the blog and podcasting world. And if I said no to them, it would almost be like suicide. Brandon, what are you doing? Don't you realize this can expose you to thousands and thousands of extra people who could be listening to your podcast, who might eventually want to purchase or read something that you wrote? Are you nuts? And I have to say, but it didn't meet my criteria. And I am settled on the fact of doing less but better. I want to do the things that really resonate with me, not the things I feel like I should be doing because it's an amazing opportunity. Anyone in their right mind would do this. Well, I am in my right mind and I'm still saying no to this because it's not meeting my criteria. I don't know if that helps. And I'm just really making it up here on the spot. So I probably will listen to this episode later and think, oh man, I could have made up a much better example than that. But I hope that helps a little bit to get your mind stirring about how you need to be thinking about this selective criteria. In fact, Greg kind of hints at this in the book, but the way you should think of this is very much like you would do a Google search. He mentions in the book, imagine doing a Google search for good restaurant in New York City versus doing a search for best slice of pizza in downtown Brooklyn. Now, both of those are kind of hinting at similar things, but vastly different results you're going to get back from a search engine. You just say good restaurant in New York City, who knows what you're going to come back with. If you're really wanting the best pizza in downtown Brooklyn, well, just say that. The more specific you can be, the better your results are going to be, and the more happy you're going to be in life. And you should approach your life this way. You should think of Googling your life and what do you want to put in the search engine. And you realize the more specific you are, the better it's going to be. Be very selective in what you do. Be very picky about what you say yes to, and be very willing to say no to things. This is going to be a huge thing that we must learn. Now, in part 3 of the book, and there's 4 parts to this book, part 3 is going to be about eliminate. So we've talked about some of the techniques to identify the vital few in your life. Now, how do we start eliminating and cutting out the trivial things in our lives? How do we say no? How do we uncommit from things? How do we limit and set boundaries in our lives to help us make better decisions in that way? And then in the last part of the book, we're going to get into executing. How do we actually put this into action? And what are some tips and tricks that we can learn along the way? So I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I hope that you've seen some areas in which you can be very selective in what you do. As I said at the beginning of the episode, please remember the survey that I have out there, firstthingsproductivity.com/survey. Remember to email me if you've got questions or comments, me@brandonvaughn.com, or you can also catch me by Twitter or Facebook. Well, I'll be honest with you, Facebook baffles me sometimes because I get messages from people and never see them at times. Or just today, I noticed that even in the message areas that there's this other group, and I don't know if other is kind of like spam, but I've got some legitimate messages in there too that were hidden quite a way. So it baffles me. Feel free to message me on Facebook. I would love to talk to you there, but emailing me will come straight to me and not get filtered by Facebook in any way. Go check out that Vanessa Van Edwards show on creativelive.com. I think that you will really benefit quite a lot from that. I've actually been thinking about not only learning that for myself, because everything she's doing is research-based, and I'm even still helping her some with some statistical type of things. I'm actually been thinking about taking my 13-year-old daughter through some of this. I wish I would have had someone teach me some of these things when I was 13 years old. And if I ever sit her down long enough to listen to me, then I may actually take her through that as well. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode on Essentialism. Go put it into practice today. Do the 90% rule, do the 1 to 10 scale in your life, and start being more picky about what you say yes to. So until next time, as always, remember this: embrace today with passion and intention, and don't die with your music still inside you. I'll see you next time.